The building was silent, except for the soft ding of the elevator. The security guard stared at the monitor, frozen. A woman had entered the lift, but the next frame showed it empty, yet still moving. What was inside, if not her? The elevator ghost Mark Dawson had worked the night shift at the Holloway Plaza for nearly 3 years. It was an easy job, mostly watching CCTV monitors, checking the occasional door, and staying awake through long stretches of silence. But that night, something felt different. Rain tapped against the tall glass windows, casting faint reflections across the marble floors. The lobby was still, bathed in sterile fluorescent light. Mark sat behind the security desk, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the monitors flicker between camera feeds. Most were blank, dark offices and empty halls. Until camera 6 blinked, he leaned forward. That camera covered the elevator lobby on the 14th floor. A woman in a white dress stood there, her hair long and damp as if she'd just come in from the rain. She didn't look familiar, and the building had no guests authorized at that hour. Mark frowned. The woman didn't press the button, yet the elevator door slid open. She stepped inside. Mark switched to the elevator feed. The doors closed, but what he saw made his stomach turn cold. The elevator was empty. The feed cycled to the next camera, still empty. And then the next, still moving, still empty. Mark blinked, rewound the footage, and watched again. The woman had clearly entered the elevator. She had been there, but from the moment the doors shut, it was as if she had vanished. Was it a glitch? He stood and adjusted the radio on his belt. "Dispatch, this is Holloway Plaza Security. Got a weird feed on elevator 3. Can you check system diagnostics?" There was static for a few seconds. Then a voice crackled through. "Everything looks normal from our end, Mark. No errors." He hesitated. "Right, thanks." But he didn't believe it was normal. Curious and unnerved, he decided to check the elevator in person. He grabbed his flashlight and keycard and took the service lift to the 14th floor. The hallway was silent. Carpets muffled his footsteps, and the soft hum of ceiling lights was the only sound. He walked to the elevator bank. All 3 elevators sat still, doors shut. Nothing looked unusual. Mark approached elevator 3 and pressed the button. The light glowed red. The doors opened with a smooth chime. Empty. He stepped inside. The air inside was ice cold. He felt it instantly, like walking into a freezer. He shivered, goosebumps rising on his arms despite his jacket. The panel lights flickered for a moment. Then the doors slid closed. "Going down," said the automated voice. Mark pressed the lobby button. The elevator descended smoothly. Floor numbers lit up one by one. 13, 12. Suddenly, the lights blinked out. The elevator jerked to a stop between floors. Total darkness. Mark's heart pounded. "No, no, no," he muttered, fumbling for the emergency radio. "Control, this is Dawson. Elevator 3 just froze. I'm stuck between 12 and 11. Can someone respond?" Static, then a soft sound. Breathing. It wasn't his. Slow, ragged breaths. Just behind him. Mark turned, but he couldn't see anything. He raised his flashlight and clicked it on. Empty. But the breath continued. Closer now. He spun again. Nothing. The lights flickered back on suddenly, making him jump. The elevator resumed moving. When it reached the lobby, the doors opened with a ding. Mark rushed out, breathing hard. He looked back just once. There was a faint outline on the back wall of the elevator, a wet handprint. The radio buzzed back to life. "Mark, you still there? Sorry, we lost you for a second." He stared at the monitor again. Camera 6, the woman in white, was gone. But now she stood in the elevator reflection, watching him. The following night, Mark returned to work, but something had shifted inside him. The memory of the woman in white and the vanishing elevator footage haunted his thoughts. He told himself it had to be a trick of the camera, a coincidence, maybe even fatigue. But deep down, he didn't believe that. The security office felt colder than usual. He sat in his chair and stared at the monitor feeds, waiting for something, anything, to confirm what he had seen. Hours passed in silence. Midnight came and went. The building slumbered. At 2:07 a.m., something flickered on camera 9. Mark leaned forward. It showed the 10th floor hallway, one of the older sections of the building, rarely used anymore since most tenants had moved to the renovated floors. A man in a blue hoodie stood outside room 1013. Mark didn't recognize him. The man looked anxious, glancing over his shoulder repeatedly. He seemed to be waiting for someone. Then the lights in the hallway blinked twice. The man knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. Still silence. Suddenly, the door opened by itself, slowly, creaking wide without anyone inside pulling it. The man hesitated, then stepped inside. The door closed. Mark blinked. Weird. He logged the time in his report and made a note to check the room. But just as he started typing, he glanced at the screen again. The man was gone. He rewound the feed. There was no glitch. The man had gone inside, but never came back out. Mark switched to interior cams for that floor. Room 1013 had no internal cameras. None of the individual offices did, but the hallway remained clear. No sign of the man exiting, no elevator called, no stairs used. It was like he had vanished. A chill ran through Mark's spine. He took the service elevator up to the 10th floor. This time, he made sure he had a flashlight, his radio, and a crowbar tucked into his belt. Not that he expected to need it, but just in case. The hallway was dead quiet. Old carpet muffled his steps as he approached room 1013. The number plate on the door was dusty, half broken. The light above flickered weakly. Mark knocked. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. He radioed in, voice calm but alert. "Dispatch, this is Dawson. I'm on 10th, checking room 1013. Doors locked, but there was a man on camera entering it about 10 minutes ago. No sign of him exiting. A moment of static, then. That room's been unoccupied for months. No tenant listed." Mark frowned. "Understood. I'm going to breach the door. Logging entry for safety." He wedged the crowbar into the door frame and pried it open with a loud pop. The door creaked as it swung inward. Dust floated in the beam of his flashlight. The room was empty. Old furniture covered in white sheets lined the walls. A broken chair, a desk missing a leg. No signs of recent use, no personal belongings, and definitely no man in a hoodie. Mark stepped inside. His flashlight scanned the room. The floor creaked beneath him. He called out, "Security? Anyone here?" Silence. Then he noticed something odd. The closet door was slightly ajar. He approached slowly, heart pounding. He reached for the knob and pulled it open with one swift motion. Empty. Just brooms, a stack of old boxes, and... Wait. He crouched down. One of the boxes had a name scrawled on it in faded ink. Thomas Elridge, 2007. He didn't recognize the name, but the year caught his attention. 2007 was when the 10th floor had been shut down due to an electrical fire in one of the corner offices. And as far as Mark knew, no one named Thomas Elridge had ever come back to claim anything. He stood up and turned to leave when something caught his eye in the hallway mirror just outside the door. A shadow, standing still, not his. He spun around. The hallway was empty, but he had seen it. A tall shape, like someone watching him from just beyond the light. Mark didn't wait. He shut the door and double-timed it back to the elevator. As he reached for the call button, the elevator arrived on its own. The doors opened. It was empty, but that cold air was back. The same chill he'd felt the night before. He hesitated, then stepped in. As the doors closed, a faint whisper brushed his ear. "Don't let it follow." Mark froze. "Who said that?" he demanded. No reply, only the soft hum of descent. When the elevator opened in the lobby, Mark stepped out quickly. The cold vanished behind him. He rushed back to the security office, pulled up the logs, and searched for anything about Thomas Elridge. After some digging through archived reports, he found a single entry from June 2007. Fire on 10th floor. Suspected electrical failure. 1 casualty. Tenant name, Thomas Elridge. Body not recovered. Floor sealed for renovation. Mark leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. The man in the hoodie had never existed. Or maybe he had once. And now, something else was moving through that floor, through the elevator, connected by something deeper. He looked at the monitors again. Camera 6 flickered. The elevator was moving at 2:13 a.m. and again, it was empty. Mark couldn't sleep after his shift. He spent the entire morning replaying the footage, scanning each frame of the man in the hoodie. Every time, the same result. He walked into room 1013 and never came out. But the part that unsettled Mark most was the elevator. Every night, just after 2 a.m., it moved between floors. Always alone, always slow, sometimes stopping for minutes at a time, always empty. But Mark wasn't convinced it was empty. That night he arrived early for his shift, bringing a notebook and a thermos full of coffee. He had a plan. He would stay alert, follow the elevator's movements live, and this time, if it moved by itself again, he'd follow it. At exactly 1:55 a.m., he sat forward in his chair. The lobby was still. The cameras showed no motion, but a static buzz started to creep into the feed from camera 6, the elevator view. A.M., the elevator dinged softly. Mark stared at the screen. The doors slid open on the 14th floor. No one entered. A pause. Then the doors closed. The elevator began descending floor by floor. Mark grabbed his flashlight, strapped on his radio, and locked the security office. He took the stairs 2 at a time, reaching the 12th floor as the elevator passed it. He stopped at 11. The elevator had stopped. On 10th, Mark crouched low and crept into the hallway. The old carpet dampened his footsteps. He rounded the corner just as the elevator dinged again. The doors were open, and inside stood her, the woman in white. She didn't move. Her head hung low, dark hair obscuring her face. She looked almost unreal, like she didn't belong in the frame of reality. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He stood still, hidden partially behind a support column. The woman slowly raised her head. Though he couldn't see her eyes, he felt her gaze. Then she stepped out of the elevator. Her bare feet made no sound as she moved down the hallway. She walked past room 1013 and kept going toward the end of the corridor, where there was only a dead-end wall and a fire escape door that hadn't worked in years. Mark followed, silent. As the woman approached the wall, something strange happened. The lights above her flickered wildly. A loud buzz rang out. Then she walked straight through the wall. No sound, no impact. She simply vanished. Mark's heart pounded. He ran to the spot. Nothing. Solid wall. But the floor was wet. He kneeled. A puddle, like water leaking from a pipe. But it hadn't rained in days, and there were no pipes in this section. He touched it. Ice cold. He pulled back sharply, breath visible in the air now. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees. Mark stepped back, unsettled, then turned toward the elevator. The doors were still open, waiting. He walked toward it, half expecting it to shut before he reached it, but it didn't. He stepped inside. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see where you're going." He pressed the lobby button. The doors closed, but instead of going down, the elevator began to rise. Mark didn't touch any upper floor buttons. Floor 11, then ding. There was no 15th floor. The building only had 14 floors. Mark stared at the number display, stunned. The elevator stopped. The doors opened and revealed darkness. Beyond the doors was a long hallway, bathed in dim blue light, like moonlight filtering through fog. The air smelled of mildew, and a low humming echoed from somewhere far off. Mark hesitated, but the doors didn't close. He stepped out. The floor felt soft beneath his boots, like old carpet soaked with water. The walls were lined with apartment doors, each numbered in faded brass. 1511, 1512, 1513. No such floor existed in the building plans. This entire place was wrong. He walked slowly, listening. Then he heard it. A voice, faint, crying. A woman sobbing echoed down the hallway. Mark followed the sound, his flashlight flickering. It came from behind one of the doors. 1517. The door was cracked open. He pushed it slowly. Inside was a room identical to room 1013 on the 10th floor. Same furniture, same layout. But the walls were wet, dripping with condensation. At the center of the room was a bathtub, and in it, a woman. Mark froze. She was curled up, soaked, long hair clinging to her back. Her shoulders trembled with each sob. He took a cautious step forward. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you hurt?" She didn't respond. He stepped closer, hand on his radio. "Security." "I found." The woman turned. Her face pale, eyes hollow, mouth open wider than humanly possible. And her scream, no sound, just an open mouth stretching endlessly. Mark stumbled back. shake. The lights above burst in a flash of sparks. The woman rose from the tub, still silent, water pouring from her as if she were made of it. Mark ran out the door, down the hallway. He hit the elevator button again and again. It finally arrived, doors opening wide. He jumped in, hit lobby. As the doors closed, he saw her, just a few steps away. But the elevator began to descend, fast. Floor numbers blinked past. 15, 14, 13. Mark leaned against the wall, breathing hard. When it finally reached the lobby, he sprinted out. The cold vanished. The light returned to normal. Mark looked back. The elevator doors closed slowly, and the panel no longer showed a 15th floor. It ended at 14 again. He returned to the security office, hands trembling. What he had seen wasn't just a ghost. It was a place, a memory, a broken fragment of something real and dangerous. And now, it knew he'd been there. Mark couldn't shake the image of the woman, the hollow eyes, the endless scream. Even though he had left the eerie floor behind, it felt like it had followed him. It lingered in the back of his mind, creeping into every thought. He couldn't stop thinking about the 15th floor, the floor that shouldn't even exist, how it had appeared, and why was that woman there, her face twisted and tortured. It wasn't just a ghost. Something far darker was at play. That night, he showed up for his shift with one purpose: to uncover the truth. He had already made up his mind. He would go back to the 15th floor. He would find answers. As he sat in the security office watching the clock tick closer to 2 a.m., Mark found himself unable to sit still. His fingers drummed restlessly against the desk, and his mind raced with questions. The footage of the elevator still haunted him, the empty elevator that kept moving on its own, the woman in white, and the inexplicable 15th floor. It all seemed too connected, too wrong. At exactly 2:03 a.m., the elevator began to move. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He checked the monitor. Camera 6 showed the elevator moving between floors. It stopped at the 10th, and then the doors opened, but no one entered. The elevator moved again. Mark's hand hovered over the button for the 14th floor, but instead, he grabbed the radio. "Control, this is Dawson. I'm going to check something. Keep the feed running." "Copy that, Mark," the dispatcher replied, the voice crackling with static. Mark's boots clicked against the floor as he took the stairs again, moving quickly, his flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. When he reached the 10th floor, he paused. The silence of the building felt unnaturally thick. It was as if the entire structure was holding its breath. He walked to the elevator bank, and there it was. The elevator stood still, its doors slightly open. Mark hesitated, then stepped inside. The floor display read 14, but this time he didn't press the button. He waited. The doors closed on their own. The elevator began to rise. Floor 11, and then 14. The doors slid open. Nothing. Empty. Mark stepped out cautiously. He could feel it in the air. A sense of foreboding. A deep unease that twisted in his gut. The 14th floor was supposed to be a normal floor, but everything felt off. The long hallway stretched ahead, eerily quiet, the overhead lights flickering slightly. A chill brushed his skin as he moved toward the far end of the hall, where the service stairwell door stood. Mark's mind raced. He had to find the hidden entrance to the 15th floor. If it existed, it had to be somewhere on this floor. As he passed a row of unoccupied rooms, something caught his eye. Room 14-5. The door was slightly ajar, and there was something strange about it. A faint, cold draft seemed to be emanating from the crack in the door, and a faint glow could be seen through the gap. His heart raced. He approached the door and pushed it open slowly. Inside was a mess. Papers were scattered across the floor, furniture upturned, the remnants of something long abandoned. But it wasn't the state of the room that froze Mark in place. It was what was on the wall. The wall had been scratched, deep, jagged marks, as if something or someone had clawed at it. The marks were erratic, almost desperate, and beneath them, the words were written in what looked like charcoal. "Don't go to the 15th floor." Mark stepped back, his breath coming in the shallow gasps. The words were still visible. They were fresh. Suddenly, a noise behind him made him freeze. A creaking sound from the service stairwell door. Mark turned quickly, but there was nothing. The door had opened on its own, just a crack. He could feel the cold air coming from the stairwell beyond. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but he couldn't. Not yet, not with so many unanswered questions. He stepped into the stairwell. The doctor swung shut behind him with a soft click. The stairs were steep, narrow, and dark. The smell of dust and mildew hung thick in the air. Mark's flashlight barely cut through the darkness. As he descended, he tried to keep his breathing steady, his mind focused on what lay ahead. The 15th floor. The stairs creaked under his weight as he moved lower, step by step. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The deeper he went, the colder it became. By the time he reached the bottom, he could barely feel his fingers. His breath fogged in the air. And then he saw it. A door at the far end of the stairwell. It was old, rusted. It had no number, no sign, just a plain, unremarkable door, like the kind you'd find in an abandoned warehouse. He stepped forward and turned the handle. The door creaked open. Beyond it was a hallway. This hallway was different from the others in the building. The walls were cracked, the floor uneven. The air was thick with the scent of dampness. But what chilled Mark most wasn't the state of the building. It was the feeling that something was watching him. He stepped inside and the door slammed shut behind him. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead. At the far end, Mark could just make out a dim light. It flickered in the distance, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He took another step forward, then another. His footsteps echoed unnervingly in the silence. And that's when he saw her, the woman in white. She stood at the far end of the hall, her back to him, her head tilted slightly to one side. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He knew it was her. It had to be. She turned slowly, her face pale and distorted. Her hollow eyes locked onto his, unblinking. The woman didn't move, but Mark could hear her now. Her voice, a whisper. "Leave this place." Mark's body froze. His legs wouldn't move. He couldn't look away. The whisper grew louder. "Leave now, or join us." Mark's pulse raced. He spun around, ready to run, but the hallway was gone. In its place stood the elevator, the doors open, waiting. Mark stared at the open elevator doors, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman, the one in white, had disappeared, leaving only the elevator in its place. It was as if she had been nothing but a fleeting nightmare, a phantom conjured from the darkest corners of the building. But Mark knew better. He had seen too much, felt too much. Something was horribly wrong, and he couldn't leave without uncovering the truth. He stepped forward, hesitated for just a moment, then entered the elevator. The doors closed behind him with a soft, almost inaudible ding. He pressed the button for the lobby. He wasn't sure why, but it felt like the right choice. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the button, but the elevator didn't respond. Instead, it began to move on its own. It ascended, floor by floor. Mark felt the familiar sense of dread wash over him as the elevator moved past the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, and finally the 13th floor. The 14th floor came next, but the elevator didn't stop there. It continued to rise. Mark's eyes flickered nervously between the floor display and the doors, which now seemed impossibly distant. He pressed the emergency stop button, but nothing happened. The elevator moved faster, climbing higher than it should have. Mark's stomach lurched as the elevator reached the top, its mechanism grinding against the weight of something unseen. Then, the elevator jolted to a halt. The lights flickered violently, plunging the elevator into darkness. Mark's breath hitched. The air was colder now, and a deep, unnatural silence surrounded him. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. Mark's eyes widened in horror as the display read, Floor 15. He had made it. The doors opened, revealing a dimly lit hallway that stretched out into the unknown. The air smelled stale, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. The walls were cracked and peeling, the floor covered in layers of dust, and at the far end of the hallway, a figure stood waiting. Mark's body froze. It was the woman in white. She stood at the end of the hall, her head tilted downward, her long, dark hair cascaded down her back like a veil. The same hollow eyes stared at him, empty and cold, like two black voids that seemed to swallow all light. Mark's pulse raced. His legs felt the weak beneath him, but he couldn't look away. There was something hypnotic about her presence, something that drew him in despite the terror gnawing at his mind. She spoke in a voice barely louder than a whisper, yet it seemed to reverberate in his skull. "You shouldn't have come." Mark's throat was dry. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his mouth. It was as if the very air had thickened, making it impossible to breathe. The woman stepped forward. Slowly, each movement seemed deliberate, calculated. As she walked toward him, the temperature in the hallway dropped, and Mark's breath fogged in the cold air. "Who are you?" Mark finally managed to ask, his voice trembling. The woman stopped in front of him, mere inches away. Her face was pale, almost lifeless, her eyes two empty wells. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she extended a thin, ghostly hand toward him. Mark stepped back, panic rising in his chest. "What do you want from me?" The woman's lips curled into a slow, eerie smile. "I was once like you." Mark blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" The woman's smile faded as her gaze grew distant. "I lived here, in this building, before it was abandoned, before they left us behind." Mark's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about?" "Who are you?" "I was a tenant," she said softly, her voice now thick with sorrow. "Just like the others. We lived here, worked here, until the fire." A cold chill ran down Mark's spine. "The fire? What fire?" She stepped closer, and Mark felt the temperature drop further. Her voice became a low, mournful whisper. "The fire that consumed us all. The one they never told you about. The one they buried with the building. They wanted to forget, but they couldn't. We never left." The woman's eyes locked with his, her gaze piercing through him like a knife. "And now, neither will you." Mark's heart raced. He could feel something shifting around him, a presence growing stronger, suffocating him. The walls seemed to close in, the floor beneath him groaning, as if the entire building were alive, moving, breathing. The woman's ghostly hand reached for him again, and this time Mark couldn't pull away. It was as if an invisible force was holding him in place. "Why me?" Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman's face contorted with sorrow, and for a moment, Mark saw something that looked almost like pity in her eyes. "Because you're here. Because you've uncovered the truth." Her fingers brushed his cheek, and in that moment, a flood of memories hit Mark like a wave. He saw glimpses of the building before it was abandoned, before the fire. He saw people, faces, all of them living their lives, walking the same hallways he had walked, working the same floors he had worked. And then, the fire, the flames engulfing the building, trapping people inside, the screams, the chaos. The building had been sealed, the truth buried, but some of them, some of the souls, had never left. They remained trapped in this place, just like her. Mark stumbled back, his breath ragged. He needed to get out. He needed to leave before it was too late. But the woman's gaze followed him. She stepped closer, her voice now sharp, commanding. "It's too late. You've already come too far. There's no escaping it now." Mark turned to run, but the hallway stretched impossibly long, and the elevator doors were nowhere in sight. He was trapped. The woman's voice echoed in his mind. "Join us." Mark's heart hammered in his chest. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped. The building around him groaned as if it were alive, and Mark realized with growing horror that he had become part of the building's cursed history. He would never leave. And in that moment, as the shadows closed in around him, Mark understood the true horror of the building. The elevator wasn't just a machine. It was a gateway, a link between the living and the dead. And once you entered, you couldn't escape.